Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome to the I Care About You podcast, where we explore healing, self love, personal growth, and deep honesty and compassion. Today, we're driving into the topics that are often overlooked when we talk about betrayal. Most of us think infidelity when we hear the word betrayal in a relationship, but what about the betrayals that don't involve cheating or another person coming between you? The ones that leave us feeling unheard, unseen, and emotionally abandoned. These betrayals aren't loud or obvious. They are slow and subtle, cracks that form over time until one day we wake up and realize we don't trust the person we're with anymore. I'm talking about things like chronic lying, even about small things, until you question reality, disrespect, whether it be dismissive or criticism or belittling, not remembering things about you, like your birthday, your favorite book, or a story you told last week, or even like what you did yesterday, or what you wore, or anything. Pretending to care about your needs, but consistently ignoring them or forgetting about them. Being emotionally unavailable, making you feel like you're an outsider in your own relationship. Inability to have deep and difficult conversation, sweeping problems under the rug, or just ignoring them, or not even addressing or acknowledging their existence. Refusing to grow or change, expecting you to accept things how they are, even if they're hurting you or not what you want. Addiction, whether it be substances, work, social media, or anything that keeps them distant, such as being on their phone scrolling while you're doing something together. Pretending to be someone they're not. Building the relationship on false foundations. Never giving, only taking. Making you feel like you're alone in the relationship, being self-absorbed, where you feel more like an accessory to their life than a true partner, manipulation, using guilt, passive aggressiveness, or playing the victim to control the situation, gaslighting, making you question your own reality by denying things they said, twisting events, or acting like you're too sensitive. If any of these sound familiar, you're not alone. In this episode, we're going to break it all down. We're going to talk about why do people act this way, how does it erode trust and emotional safety, and how do we heal from this kind of betrayal. So grab your journal and tea and settle in, because we're going to get real about the hidden betrayals that hurt the most and how to overcome them and move forward. A lot of these things from that list that I mentioned, you might think, oh no, sometimes I do that. And sometimes everyone does a bit of those things. I'm talking about when the person's MO is to always be like that in a relationship. When you start expecting things like something happened and there'll be no conversation. They don't remember anything I've said. The whole gaslighting situation. And they'll also not considering you as equal. And when you try to bring up things like they're being sexist or something of that nature, they just pass it off as a joke and never ever hear what you're saying. Their inability to go inward and self-reflect is part of this whole mechanism. They just want you to bend so that they don't have to do that work. All of that creates a slow erosion of trust. As I said, betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet neglect. It's the way you stop sharing your thoughts because you know no one will listen to you. It's the moment you realize their words mean nothing because their actions never match, or they're really good at this. If something happens and they say they heard you and they will try and do something differently, and they do it for like 2 weeks or a month, and then consistently go back to their old way of being every time. When that happens over and over, that's kind of in that same ballpark. You realize your words mean nothing. Nothing's really sticking. They aren't really putting in the energy to help you with your needs. It's the exhaustion of explaining your pain over and over, only to be met with excuse and indifference. When you're constantly bringing up things in the relationship that either aren't healthy, aren't serving anybody, are actually hurting things, and you're met with excuses and indifference. Very easy to see when you try to tell somebody one little thing, and there's always an excuse. And they oftentimes have a hard time with saying they're sorry, too. They just excuse it, and then that's it. And then they wait for you to go on to something else and stop thinking about it. One of the most damaging aspects of this type of betrayal is that it creates in you a self-doubt. You start asking yourself stuff like, am I expecting too much? Am I overreacting? Am I the problem? Am I a nag? Am I wanting too much? Am I unrealistic about what relationships even are anyway? But the truth is, Wanting to be heard and seen and respected isn't a high standard. It is the bare minimum of a relationship. And let me tell you that again, wanting to be heard and seen and respected, it isn't a high standard. It isn't an expectation that's unrealistic. It is actually the bare minimum for a relationship. So, why do people betray us in these ways? Through the research I've done in writing this podcast and in the book that I'm writing, I found that these betrayals are rarely intentional, but that doesn't make them any less painful. Some reasons people act like this might include avoidance. They fear confrontation, so they lie, they shut down, or disappear when things get tough. Emotional immaturity. They lack the skills to connect deeply, so they stay on the surface. I call these people kind of surface dwellers. You can never have a deep relationship with them because they are literally like a sheet of paper. They are literally like they can't go beneath the surface. So everything kind of stays in this, how's the weather? What'd you do this week kind of place. Selfishness, they prioritize their own needs above all else, sometimes unconsciously. Insecurities, they fear vulnerability, so they build walls instead of bridges. Addiction or trauma, their past experiences shape their inability to be present and reliable. Entitlement, they believe that you should love them as they are, even if who they are is hurting you. Control, gaslighting, and manipulation are often used to maintain power in the relationship. It can also be that they need to be the one who is on the top of your pyramid and you fall below in the structure. Like if there was an org chart of your relationship, they're at the top and you fall underneath it somewhere. There's not a sense of equality in your relationship. And I say that these types of things are unconscious a lot of the times, but they can also be conscious. You could have brought them up in your relationship over time, and they just didn't bother to hear you or anything. They just keep moving forward in the same way they were. Even though these ways of being might not always be deliberate, they are still a mechanism that creates real consequences for the relationship and for you and how you see yourself. What is the aftermath like when you finally realize you've been betrayed? So recently, this happened to me. I've known this person for over 20 years. I know him very, very, very well. And one day I realized he is lying to me. He's lying to me to avoid having a conversation about something. He's lying to me, has no intention of doing what he's saying he's going to do. And this was after he proved that, told me one thing, but did another. And like a lightning bolt or like a light went off, or I just had this aha moment that, oh my God, this person's been lying to me the entire time I've known them. And it sparked a lot of the other things on that list, like pretending to be someone you're not, emotionally unavailable, lying, just using anger. I was really big on using anger to stop you from furthering a conversation. So it was like a wall of anger you would get, and then you would back up. And just how superior the person was and entitled, and thinking just because they were a guy, they were entitled to being dominant in any relationship that they had, or else they just completely discounted it. So if you weren't willing to be dominated by this really manipulative, weird scenario, then you got cast aside. And it just hit me. Like, I don't even know who this person is. I literally don't know them because they have been creating a persona the entire time I've known them that isn't anything like who they are. Sometimes that will happen. It will be one moment where it all clicks into place and you say to yourself, oh my God, I don't even know this person. Or what am I doing with this person? Or this person's a liar, or however it manifests for you. But there'll be this moment where you kind of realize you're being betrayed in all these small ways. And oftentimes it's more than one. It's more than one way. Especially the one thing a lot of people like to do is weaponized incompetence. They'll pretend they can't do something, or they're incapable of doing something, or they can't learn to do something. And they, even though they can, but they use this pretend incompetence to get you to do a lot of things for them, or to do all the things that are a drag. And I'll do another podcast on that because it's so interesting. And I have so many times in my life where I had relationships where someone was doing that to me for a long period of time. I bought it for a long period of time because I really try to be kind and thoughtful to people. And I have my moments of not being kind and thoughtful. Definitely, we all do. But yeah, these kinds of tools people use against you in a relationship, and it's a betrayal. Nobody should be doing anything against you in a relationship. That's not what it's about. It's not about competition and control and who's on the top of the pyramid. When betrayal doesn't come from a form of a single undeniable act like cheating, but instead years of some type of disregard, it can be harder to recognize. So here are some signs if you haven't had that aha moment. You stop trusting them, even the small things. You always know they're never going to be on time or even show up. They don't do the things they say they're going to do. You can't rely on them to do the things, or you can sort of rely on them for some things, like maybe they're really good at tasks, but they can't do anything that's on a deeper level in your relationship. So you kind of stop trusting them that they're actually going to make some shifts in their lives or do things that you need from them. It can also show up as you start to feel lonely, even when they're right beside you, because a relationship needs to grow and become deeper with time. And if they're incapable of having deeper conversations or they don't have emotional intelligence, you can't get deeper and you start to feel lonely because you're growing as a person and they are just staying there. Their boots are stuck in the mud over there. And it starts to feel lonely because the conversations are all the same all the time. There's only certain safe subjects you can talk about. You start walking on eggshells. This is a huge one to avoid certain topics. The person I'm talking of who likes to just barrage you with anger immediately, that is exactly how I approach that relationship. Always walking on eggshells. So there's never this genuine exchange of information that can help each other because you're always walking on eggshells trying to stay in a space where you aren't going to get bombarded with anger. And for me, that is really triggering and I have a very hard time with it. And I think these people realize that and use that anger to keep me in my place. Another thing that I also did is you doubt your own perception. You're wondering if you're overreacting, if you really heard what they said, as your expectations are too unachievable. You just start doubting if you really actually experienced it the way you did, saw it the way you did, if it's valid, are you overreacting, all those things. It just becomes this thing where you're so insecure about how you feel about everything because they've taken those things from you over time in the relationship. I mean, you've played a role, right? You've allowed the situation to happen, but sometimes it's subconscious on your part too. You're just trying to have a relationship and sometimes they're really great and they just lack in these other areas. And that's kind of a hard thing to reconcile. Or you don't feel like you're worthy of a relationship that's healthy. And so you stay there. Or you feel like this poor person needs help. I need to stay here and help them. Or however it is that you've justified it or you've worked through it for yourself. You're also playing a role, right? You could have been like, no, the first time it happened. But you're giving them grace. You're finding compassion and empathy. And that's a good thing. So I don't want you to feel like you should feel bad about who you are because you allowed something like this to happen. Because believe me, I've allowed it to happen more than once to me, more than once. Another thing that happens through all of this is you just feel emotionally exhausted, as if loving them is a full-time job. Now, we all go through hard times in relationships where it's hard work. People say relationships are hard work, but it should also be easy at times. And if you feel like you're just exhausted from the relationship and that loving them is a full-time job and keeping them functional is a full-time job and keeping them happy is a full-time job, then that is a red flag. Gaslighting in particular can make it even harder to see the betrayal clearly. If your partner constantly rewrites the history or denies things they've said or makes you feel like you're crazy, you may start to distrust your own memory and emotions. This happened to me in 2 relationships, big time. One person did all those things, and I had no idea what was up or down. And the other person really just denied all the things they ever said or things that happened. And that was just as disorienting. But not as destructive in the long run, because when I got out of the relationship where the person was doing all those things, it was a lot to rebuild who I actually was as a human being. But in the other relationship where they were just denying the things they said, to me, that was just part of the whole lying quality that they had in the relationship. How do you heal? How do you move forward? How do you find relationships that are not in the betrayal mode? Healing from this form of betrayal is complex because there is often no clear breaking point, just a series of small heartbreaks. And here's what I've learned. Well, first, I want to say I had that series of small heartbreaks. Until that moment, I had the aha moment. And that changed everything for me because I did spend years justifying the behavior of this particular person to other people that they were hurting. I spent years justifying it or making it right or helping them have conversations to mend their fences. Or I was really, really bad. And it was not healthy for me to be doing that on either side. A long time in that relationship, there was no clear breaking point. So I just kept questioning myself because that was really the only thing I could do, because they're a wall. You can't penetrate it because it's just impossible. It's impossible to penetrate it. So you start thinking it's you, these series of small heartbreaks, or somehow you. But here's what I have learned overall in the relationships I've had like this. Acknowledge the betrayal. That is huge, huge, huge. Stop minimizing or rationalizing the stuff they're doing. If you feel hurt and dismissed, your feelings are valid, and leave it at that. Stop trying to rationalize how the person was or to make excuses for them or anything like that. You deserve to be in a relationship where you feel valid and you feel heard and you feel seen. That is the bare minimum. And you're equal. That's the bare minimum of a relationship. And if you aren't getting that, you aren't in a relationship that is serving you and is healthy. So acknowledging the betrayal, even if it's not like, I acknowledge that this is happening and I'm leaving you, get out. It can be acknowledging it to yourself. Oh shit, this is happening. And what am I going to do about it? What do I need to do? Do I need to go talk to somebody else for my own support and validation? Do I need to start working with a professional about it? What do I need to do to acknowledge this betrayal? Sometimes you can't just walk away from the person because maybe they're in your family or they're very close to you. And you can't just walk away, but you can work on ways to be in community with the person without continually experiencing this betrayal anymore and internalizing it. Ask yourself, is this fixable? Is this a communication issue, or is this who they are? Some people can grow and others will never meet you where you need them to. And that is a really important distinction. Some people, because like I said, a lot of this is subconscious, they've learned it somewhere, maybe they've had trauma in their past and they're just unaware, but they are willing to grow. That's different from the person who will never meet you where you need them to be. And it will become obvious because they can't self-reflect. They can't see what you're saying. They don't have real remorse. They're not gung-ho about working on it, fixing it for themselves. They don't see that it's a breaking point. Try to figure out if it's fixable. Sometimes you'll need to bounce this off someone else to kind of see, well, you know the person, what do you think? And get other people's perspective. In the first relationship I was talking about that I eventually left, that was pivotal for me. Having other people outside of this little family dynamic tell me, no, that person is not good for anybody, or that person is toxic, or that person will never change. I needed to hear that from people that were close to me that I valued in order to hear it for myself. Set boundaries. I talk about boundaries a lot. It's a very fuzzy topic, even though our cultures seem to put it in this box of you should have these boundaries. It's still really fuzzy. So give yourself some grace with this one. If someone is consistently making you feel unseen, unheard, unloved, protect yourself. It's okay to say, I deserve more. So maybe with the boundaries, you're identifying some feelings that you might have when you feel like the boundaries are crossed, or some ideas that come. Like if you're constantly feeling unseen, protect yourself with a boundary, even if it is just to go, I deserve more. This isn't working for me. Figure out what boundaries you need to put in place. I put boundaries in place between me and this person I was talking about, which actually really requires not engaging with them that much. But to me, that feels great. They were pretty mad about it. Yes, 100%. They were mad about it. And of course, it was all my fault. But I just had to put these boundaries in place for my own happiness. And it's been great. I'm so much more happier. I don't have to listen to so much of just the bullshit and negativity all the time. It's been amazing. And that was a boundary that I put in place, which was a pretty big, rigid boundary. It wasn't like tiny little boundaries, like I'm not going to be with them when they're drinking or something like that. It was a big boundary. And that really helped me. But you might not be able to put such a big boundary in place. You might have to set some little boundaries. So give some thought to that and find some support if you need it. Rebuild your own self-trust. Betrayal by someone else often leads to the betrayal of self because you end up doing things you know aren't really what you want to do and you feel icky about it, but you do it because you're trying to keep the relationship alive. And you stop trusting your intuition or your gut. Right? I totally did this. I started just being exactly like that person. If that person wanted to talk shit about people every day, all day, I did it. And I didn't feel that good about it, but I thought like, okay, well, I better do that because that appears to be what you do. So I got into that groove of being like that and being mad at other people for not making my life wonderful all the time. And I started doing all those things. And I realized that I was betraying myself for such a long period of time, like decades, that it's a lot to rebuild your self-trust. And even now, I often check in with myself. If I'm not quite sure about something, I'll just take a moment to go, how do you feel about this? Like, how do you feel? Not what you expect other people to think you feel, but how do you feel about this? How can you be honest with yourself? I just started coming up with questions to help me check in with myself and to rebuild that self-trust. And sometimes rebuilding that self-trust, again, involves someone who's supporting you to say, no, that's not crazy, or to remind you, what does your intuition say? What does your gut say? How do you feel inside your body? That's a huge thing about self-trust, is if you start betraying yourself, it feels gross in your body somewhere. A stomach ache, a headache, a neck ache, arm ache, whatever it is, you start feeling it in your body, extreme fatigue. So do some work on what does self-betrayal look like for you, feel like for you? How can you recognize it when it comes up? And what are some things that you can do to check in with yourself when you're feeling those feelings? Decide what you want your future to look like. This is huge. I think everybody should do it all the time, whether you're in a relationship that's betraying you or just in your life. What would your future look like? If nothing changed, would you be okay with the relationship as it is? If the answer is no, what are you willing to do about it? It's good to check in with, what does your future look like? If nothing changed, would you be happy 10 years from now, just as your future is right at this moment? With the relationship you have, would you be happy with it as is if it never progressed into anything more than what it is now? If the answer is no, what are you willing to do about it? And that can be true for anything in your life. I think we should all play this what would your future look like game with ourselves at least once a year, just to keep us moving in the place we want to move in. Sometimes we have a hard time seeing things that are hurting us or aren't serving us anymore. And doing this check-in with yourself about what the future would look like can help you stay on track, realize what you need, define yourself at a deeper level, and get clear on what do you want your future to look like? And has it changed? It can change all the time. It does all the time. I'm sure the future you thought of when you were 8 years old is different than the future you thought of when you were 25. There might be some common threads, but there's a lot of differences in there. Play that game with yourself. What would the future look like? If nothing changed, would you be happy with it, or do you want something more? And as always, my friends, healing is a choice that you'll make daily with all things. Not all betrayals involve another person. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from a partner's disinterest, dishonesty, or lack of care. And here's a hard truth. Someone who truly loves you will show up for you. They will listen, they will learn, they will grow, not perfectly, but intentionally. If they refuse to do that, they are showing you who they are. So just believe them. If somebody refuses to listen, learn, and grow, see them for who they are. That's who they are. Believe them. Believe them. If they say they're going to do something and they don't, or they lie, believe them that they're a liar. Don't make excuses. If you've experienced this kind of betrayal, know this. You deserve a relationship where you feel valid, cherished, and safe. You are not asking for too much. You are asking the wrong person. You are not asking for too much in this relationship. You're just asking the wrong person. You don't have to wait for someone else to give you love and respect. You can start giving that to yourself. And remember, the baseline is someone who treats you as an equal, cares for you, listens to you, makes you feel heard and seen and respected. That's the baseline. That's the bottom. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody who you think might need it. We're all in community together. This channel is about community. So please share this with somebody if you think it would help. Please let me know if I didn't cover something that you thought was important. Please let me know how it's going for you, or if you have any tips for other people, because again, we're all in this together. And if you would like more healing tools, check out my book, Reasons to Live. The link is in the description. It has a lot of exercises for learning who you are, for finding self-love and compassion, and for helping others through dark times and the challenges that life brings. And like I said, let me know what roadblocks you face. DM me on Instagram or in any of the other platforms I'm on, or leave a comment if you're on a platform that allows. So thank you so much, my dear friends. Until next time, be kind to yourself because you deserve it, and know that I love you and I support you, and you can make these changes in your life. I know you can. So take care.